So, Nitro fans, welcome to part 2 of this Nitro rebuild, and we're going to try and turn this Nitro 1/10 buggy into a rally car. Now, in between everything that's been going on, we've been building a shed. The shed's built, the floor's down, got some flooring in there, and just waiting now for some workbenches, basically. So we're still working in in the kitchen, as it were. So, which isn't a bad thing when it gets to this time of year. Anyway, so on the last video, we stripped the majority of the chassis down. I'll put a link in the description if you haven't seen that. It came apart pretty easy. It's like, to be honest, it's like any other 1/10 or 1/8 buggy kind of setup. You know, you've got like a front diff, a rear diff, and a centre diff. I think it's got a centre diff. It may not have on this one because it's got 2-speed. I'm not sure. Looking at it, I'm not sure there's an actual diff in there, to be honest, but there could be. I'm not 100%. I don't think there's a centre diff. It's just a brake and a 2-speed. So in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the engine from the chassis, which you can probably see here, and the centre. If I called it a centre diff, I did mean 2-speed sort of setup. And we're going to try and get the bell cranks off as well. They're going to be really tough because they can kind of screw in from the top and the bottom, and that's where they rust if they get wet. And then trying to undo the bottom one, I've tried it yesterday, and it was, yeah, it was really, really tight. You've got to kind of hold something where you've got to hold the top without crushing it. So that'll be towards the end of the video because it's just undoing. Not much to see as such. But in today's video, we're going to rebuild or strip down and rebuild this. I said it, I think it's a geared diff in there. I could be wrong. It definitely has got a diff in there, so it shouldn't be too difficult to take apart. I'll say rebuild. I'm not sure whether we get it fully rebuilt in this part. Maybe we will. It depends, because we've got to get the pivot balls off here, which I know are not going to be easy because they're quite a large hex there. So I don't think, I have got a hex that'll probably fit that, but not here. Anyway, I think the first things first is to just take some of the sort of ancillaries off, if you like. So the front bumper, the front bulkhead, everything's sort of held on with typically a car of this era with these little C-clips. I'm not a great fan of them, although pretty much every car show that I've built comes with them, the older ones. So they're just a recipe for disaster of pinging off and in never ever finding them again. So it shouldn't take too long to take apart once I get all the screws out, but I'm going to try and get it built back up again and oiled and cleaned, so on and so forth. I don't know yet because the problem is we've got all this rust to get rid of on the shafts, which might be a little bit laborious. So whether or not I get it rebuilt in this video, I'd like to. I'll see how it goes. It might be a reassembly in another part. So anyway, enough of my chatting. Let's get some stuff dismantled, and I'll show you sort of bits and pieces as I do it. So I've kind of taken the front suspension apart. It comes apart really, really easy. Once you took the front cross member, well, the front, it's not a cross member, is it? Shock mount off, which is really the only thing holding it together. It just, if you can see there, it just like peels apart like this. So this is all plastic. I think once I've got the hubs off at the front, they can be cleaned, and the bearings cleaned, but this is all plastic, so I won't probably have to take too much apart on here, it's just plastic. And the front geared housing, if you like, it's just like this. It's just a complete unit. It does feel quite loose at the moment, so it'd be quite handy, you know, once I've rebuilt it. The diff itself doesn't feel too bad, I have to say. And looking at this, it can go in any way. Apart from the fact, it would make the gear the wrong way around, wouldn't it, inside? So that's something I need to, I've just realised, make sure that I don't put it in the wrong way round. Because if it goes into the suspension in the centre there, that way round, and I put it in that way round, is that going to make a difference? I don't know. But I know it's gone in like this. I know that's the way it came out. So I think the thing I need to do right now is maybe I do need to clean this up, the centre part, because that's the messy bit. And then these pillow balls need to come off of there. I mean, they are fairly stiff. So when you do that, I don't know whether they should be that stiff. They're a little bit more free play, I would think. And the bearings feel just dry. I mean, with a bit of oil, I'm sure they'll be fine. So what I'm going to concentrate on is this centre diff. You can see how rusty these drive shafts are. They will clean up. It's interesting. It's not until you get things apart that you understand how they go together. And I think that's quite a good thing with RC. If you take things apart meticulously, you should be able, for the most part, to build a kit without the need of instructions. I think it's easier reverse building, so taking it apart and then putting it back together, rather than a box of bits and trying to build it, I guess. But anyway, that's just an opinion. So I'm gonna strip this down, and then I'll be back with some information about what's in there and how it goes together. Can't see it being too complicated. And there we have it apart, very easy. So you've got the output shafts which come on. It's a very small, weak, just about does the job kind of feel to this RC car. So you've got the output shafts which come off, and you've got the two halves of the gearbox, and in there we've got like a main, like a diff and a pinion, which is typically TTO2-esque. We've got some bolts, screws here which hold it, really tiny screws which hold this in, which take this apart. So you must have the planet gears inside that. It doesn't look that worn anyway, and everything does look fairly good condition. I think the bearing, this one looks a little bit, the inner race looks a little bit bent, but with this all cleaned up, which I'm going to clean up, take this diff apart, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. It's just going to be planet, it's going to be like this, isn't it, with some, like a cross in there with a diff, like a planet wheel going round. So it's not going to be, you know what it looks like, but it's just interesting to see, how it looks. I mean, this looks fairly cheap aluminium, not aluminium, is it cast gears, which is like TTO2. In fact, TTO2, are they plastic? I can't remember now. I think the main gear's plastic, isn't it? And then the inner gears are metal. I can't remember. I've got a couple. So anyway, we're going to take this apart. And I've got it that way because the diff itself has to go this way back in. And I'm going to mark the top of the casing with T so that I can remember which way it goes back. Yeah, so let me just get this bit apart, which is a bit messy, but it shouldn't take too long, and I'll show you the inside. That was dead simple, and it's kind of as expected. There's the main gear with like a planet, what are they called? Like, look, drive gear in the middle. I don't know what they're called actually. Should know, shouldn't I? And in there you've got like the other 2 planet wheels which go round to make a geared diff. So it's nothing spectacular. I've just got to remember which way round this was, which I've already forgotten. Sealed, oiled, cleaned. It should be a lot smoother. It was fairly smooth anyway, but anyway, this is a messy bit. I'm not going to do it on camera. When you see this, it will be sort of back like this again, but a bit cleaner, and before I sort of put it all back together in here. So I'll get things apart and we'll go from there. So that's with everything cleaned now, all the grease is off. So we're going to rebuild this diff. I'm putting a bit more effort into it than usual because I just like doing things like this. So we're going to be using this Castrol Moly grease, which is probably a little bit overkill for the inside the diff, but it will work. We are going to seal the diff unit and the casing on the outside with some instant gasket. Just a small, don't need a load in there, really small amount. And then we've got some bearing oil just to put on the bearings, just to free those up, as they've been in the car for years and nothing's been done. And all this is just, maybe this part of the video is a little bit of a tutorial of how I build my diffs. Again, they're super basic, so but I try to make the best of what I've got. I don't have any issues going forward with other diffs in other cars. I do them all like this, even from new. So first things first, we've got this sort of diff housing here. So it depends how much grease you put in there and what type of grease. So I'm going to pack it out now with this Castrol Moly grease. I'm going to put quite a bit in there. And then we close the lid, which is the other part of the diff, with the other part of that on, the planet wheel if you like. And then I'm going to put some light sealer around there. So this bit's going to be a bit messy. So I won't film me doing this because there'll be grease and shit everywhere. So I'm going to fill that with Moly grease, put this in with that, seal it very slightly, then I'll be back with a sort of a sealed unit, and we can go from there. If you're wondering how much I put in, this is like packing. You pack it out a CV joint, so you can see it is well in there. So it's not jammed like full, but it's certainly 100 times more than what was in there. And maybe it doesn't need that much for resistance, but we're going to treat it as if it's an actual car and longevity. So I'm going to attempt now to put the other half back on with the other gear. It's going to be a bit messy, and I'm going to wipe the edges down so that I can put some seal around this bit, but I need to sort of clear some of that grease off of there first. So I'll be back when I've sealed it back together. So that's back together. There's a little bit of sealant around the edges there, and I've also just put a little bit of sealant over those screws just so they don't come out, because one was loose when I took it out, and it's only in plastic, so you can't thread lock it. But it's back together. I mean, it feels like a proper diff now. As before, it felt like an empty diff. So literally, I'm going to bind this all back together. Obviously that goes in there, but it goes that way around. So it's that way. Got the bearing, got the pinion. And then I'll also put a little bit of seal around the edges here just to keep a little bit of oil. And I won't pack this out with oil because you don't need to. It's just on the pinion, isn't it? But it's a bit of a messy job, but we're getting there. So I'm going to rebuild this back together. There's only a couple of bits on there, and I'll be back with a completed unit. And there we have it, a rebuilt diff. It wasn't in bad condition anyway, but it feels super smooth now. It feels like a diff should feel like, a geared diff. So when you can hold one of the wheels there, one of the output shafts, and that's the drive shaft. Yeah, it feels really, really good. That's the top, so that's the way for me. Screws going to this side of the housing, and that's the way back into the chassis. It will go, well, not the chassis, the front assembly. Yeah, I mean, that's made such a difference. I haven't, the other one I haven't got to hand, have I? At the moment. Oh, it is here. Hang on, let me just grab this one out. This is the one that I haven't done yet. So the one that's in here hasn't been done. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it does feel like, it does feel a bit loose. That's the only thing I would say about it, because it hasn't got as much oil in there. And then when you do this one, you can hear that one, couldn't you? This one, I mean, you can obviously hear it a little bit, but really good. Onwards and upwards. So the front suspension's taken apart. It's in soak, so that's been cleaned. I've took the pillow balls off. They're fine. They're just dry. So the only reason they were tight on the knuckles is because it's just dry. So once it's all put back together, cleaned, we can go from there. So I'm just going to clean the front suspension off, which is in the sink, and then this will just be wiped down, a little buff over, because it's got some rust on some of these pillow balls, which is typical, you know, it's an old car, in it. And then we'll get it back together. I think the bearing itself there might be a little bit dry, that one. This one is not so much. So clearly, I mean, this one's come out a little bit, but I'm not too bothered about that. I took it out a minute ago. So yeah, I'm going to get all this cleaned up, put back together with the diff. A few other sort of bits and pieces just to clean up, like the anti-roll bar and clearly these. So once it's all cleaned and ready to put back on, I'll come back just to show you the process and the progress I've made.
So this part of the video, I'm going to have to do a quick voiceover because the camera was playing up and the sound was coming in and out. So I've had to mute the sound, unfortunately. But anyway, I'll do my best here. So you can see here that I'm removing the bearings from the hubs. In fact, the pillow ball hubs. Now they were fairly stuck in there, if I'm honest. So you have to use a tool to get them out. I did eventually get them out, and you can see them there on the desk. I'll kind of show you the condition of them. They're just typically, you know, they're a bit grubby, but there's nothing to worry about. They just need a bit of a clean off, which I did with some WD-40. One of the bearings was quite graunchy, but you'll see here I used some bearing oil. And I just put that on, a couple of blobs on. They are sealed, so but it won't hurt putting a little bit of this oil on for your bearings. It's super thin, so yep, that should clear that up nicely. And you can see there what I'm using. So that came with some other bearings that I bought from other kits. So I think now we're going to put them into the hubs. They fit quite nicely. They just press in. They're different sizes because the drive cups actually go all the way in. There are a typical drive cup, as you can see there. They're a little bit rusty, as expected. But, you know, a bit of a clean up with either WD-40 or a little wire brush, and everything seems to work fine. And you can see that I've got the drive cups in there now, and they spin really nice now. They weren't doing that at the beginning. They're a bit, especially the I can't remember which one it was, left or right, but one was particularly bad. Now the pillow balls are fine. They're on a lot of Traxxas cars nowadays, but they just need a little bit of a clean up. So I've got like a little wire brush there, which I used to get a bit of the rust off and clean the threads. even though the threads do go into just plastic at the end of the day, and then a little bit of wet and dry rubbing down paper. You can use that as it is wet or dry, and it just cleans that up a little bit, because I found that the pillow balls were very dry that were on the car, so that's why the steering was a little bit rough. You can see there that it's a bit out of focus because the camera's not very good, but excuse me. Anyway, got it all back together. You can see there it's nice and free, and the other side's nice and free as well. It wasn't doing that. I put a little bit of grease in there as well. So now these are the drive shafts. You can see they're terrible condition, just where they've been left. And I just clean one of them up there. So that's the one I haven't done. And you can see it's all sort of rusty and horrible. And that's the one I just rubbed it down. It could do with a little bit of paint on there, if I'm honest, to sort of the bare metal, but it's certainly a lot better than it was. As it happens, one of those drive shafts is slightly bent, which I never realised until I actually put it together. And here it is, all back together again. Quite smooth, very clean. I mean, it's nice. It's certainly better. The back one there, you can see there hasn't been touched. It's absolutely identical to the front, except it hasn't got adjustable steering arms on there. They're sort of fixed to the back of the chassis, but potentially you could just use either or, front or back, I guess. The diff there does feel free, but like I said, it feels empty, and when we opened it up, it was empty. So yeah, I'm very pleased with that. It's a little bit time consuming, but I think with the effort you put in, as you can see, you can't hear it spinning freely. So you have to just take my word for it. There's a lot of rust on that rear end, which I've got to sort out. But, you know, I'm pretty sure that we'll get there in the end. Yeah, so in the next video, what I'm going to do is just show you the rear end not done, and then probably complete it off camera because it's the same. And then I'll show the video when it's done. We'll also then take the rear end, sorry, not the rear engine, take the engine off and the centre 2-speed, and we'll call it a day from there for part 3. So this is the end of part 2. Hope you enjoyed it, and I shall see you soon. Bye for now.